There's so much to love and appreciate in what Martin McDonagh has achieved and with the help of the two of you. And as people are, I'm sure, aware, this is a film that is speaking to larger issues in the history of Ireland and what was going on at the time. This movie takes place 100 years ago. But also at its face value, when I saw it, I was so riveted and invested just in the story of these two friends and what was going to happen, whether they were going to work it out. I'd be curious to know, in the playing of it, Brendan, how much do you choose to be aware during each scene of the larger meanings, and how much are you just really concentrating on the relationship on its face value?
Well, it's an interesting question, because I think Colin's mindset is addressing all the bigger issues. He's addressing mortality in a very purposeful way. I think he's in deep despair from the very beginning, suicidal to an extent, and is in a certain degree of survival mode. So mortality and the implications of that, and art within the scheme of things, all the profundities of that are impinging on him almost to an a ridiculously unhealthy degree. So the fact that what's going on, I mean, there's a reference, I think, in or around that scene to going over where the policeman's gone over to the island and to oversee an execution, and he can't be bothered even to know which side the execution is on. He's been flippant, of course, because he would be government officer being the thing, but at the same time, I think Colin is shocked by that. So he understands the larger scheme of things more than he's really cognizant of what's happening in actuality. So that the relationship as such is lost in a kind of a sense of looking at the profundities of the world, oddly, whereas Pádraig is completely in tune because the profundities haven't impinged themselves on him yet, which doesn't last either.
And Colin, obviously everybody on screen agrees that the character you play, Pádraig, is dull. I mean, which is very risky to put a character described as dull at the center of your movie. I would argue he's not dull. Where do you fall?
No, I don't. I think he's dull. I was having a chat with Pete Hammond about dullness, I think, and I just don't think there's such thing as a dull human being, you know? I think that, no, but I don't. I think it's impossible. Like, even if you just go from a physiological standpoint, the human being cannot be dull. There are people I have found dull. There are people that have found me dull. There is no such thing as a dull human being. So that's one part of that, so I agree with you. But then Martin, of course, writes someone who is accused by the island, as you said, of being dull, but the thing about him is everywhere has to have an archetype. We all fall into some version of an archetype. We have to be able to label each other. We have to be able to recognize where threat comes, where enjoyment may be had, where support may be had, where hostility is best kept away from. So there's all these different types that we fit into, generally speaking. And on the island, everyone has a type, and I'm that fella. And so, as Brendan has said before, when it begins to be called out, I think this guy was Pádraig's protector, not just his friend. You know, I don't think Pádraig could believe that this man gave him as much time as he did. So I think Pádraig saw and probably felt the best of himself, as we often do, through the eyes of his closest friend. And when that friendship is withdrawn, then it's almost open season on the island. The protection isn't there anymore, and he becomes kind of a laughing stock. So I didn't think he was dull. I thought he was very sweet. I mean, he's not much of a conversationalist, but obviously, but he's connected, you know, as Brendan was saying, he's connected to nature, he's connected to the wonder and the simplicity of the world around him. There's a lot to be said for that.
Well, I think he was, I have no problem understanding the friendship between somebody whose head is banging away and not really giving himself a whole lot of peace. I don't think that's a new thing with Colin. And then a man who has no filter between him and the joy of life. There's something deeply profound about that of itself. So the immediacy of his connection the pure, unadulterated joy he takes in the ordinary is such balm for the soul of somebody like Colin for such a long time.
Until it's an agitation.
Until he decides that he needs to find it through art and that this becomes too much.
It becomes cloying then, I imagine, after a point.
I think he's just looking for peace, but he's not going to get it. He'll get a short respite through music, but he's not going to get peace that way anyway. Yeah, I think we see by the end that it hasn't brought him a whole lot of peace for himself.
And it's kind of, not to quantify, but it's almost to me, just as a reader of the script, not as someone who was in the film, because it belongs to you guys much more than it belongs to me, but it's almost a parable for the impossibility of the personal experience not to go out into the community. You know, that one person makes such a consequential decision and such kind of even though it's only verbally violent initially and then it becomes through self-mutilation, physical violence, it's a violent action. The withdrawal of the friendship so suddenly without any explanation is such a violent action, and stuff begins to happen in the community, and by the end of, the only person that gets out, and she doesn't get out free, she pays a price, and that is whatever sadness, it's a question for Kerry, who you saw last night, whatever sadness or whatever guilt she may or not feel for leaving the island, but the only person that gets out and really makes the change that's essential for life to evolve for her, and she's the representation of hope, as far as I'm concerned, is Kerry's character, my sister Siobhan. Yeah. She's extraordinary. The rest of us are left, you know.
And she doesn't do it at the cost of kindness. Colin tries to escape from it, but he doesn't maintain what should be his natural kindness. Yeah, and I think that's why Siobhan is allowed to be that beacon of hope, because she doesn't lose herself in the leaving.
Yeah, she tries to bring me with her. She extends that invitation so clearly. Yeah. You know.
How's Jenny the donkey doing?
She's grand. She's living large, as they say. She'll be on MTV Cribs next week. She's put on a few, and she's got her winter coat on. She's rocking and rolling, man. We got a picture of her a couple of weeks ago, and she, honest to God, yeah. Got a picture of her. She's out to pasture. Yeah, she's one and done, as they say. One film, and she was like, "Fuck this! No way! 6 takes, 4 takes, fucking bell on my neck." Thanks, Martin.
I'm out. Well, speaking of hope, here's my final question. What can we all do to hope that the three of you, I mean the two of you and Martin, will make another movie sooner than 14 years from now?
It's all on Martin, yeah.